Mothman, Nain Rouge, phantoms and monsters. It's not the site of a Sherlock Holmes mystery, but a real one. Lake Michigan strangeness. Do you want to hear what remote viewer John Vivanco saw when his team looked at the area? Want to hear what I found in my investigative research? Well, join me, Rob Counts, and John Vivanco for a metaphysical show today that's out of this world.
Hello. This is going to be awesome. I think that there are way too many puzzle pieces here, and I think that we're just going to throw them all out and see what sort of like kind of fits together and make a lot of really, really huge assumptions.
Yeah, and if you guys haven't watched the first episode of this, it will warm you up. So go check out part 1 of Lake Michigan Strangeness, where we go over all kinds of fun things like the Lake Michigan Triangle, what that is, the Stonehenge of Lake Michigan, shipwrecks that no one can explain, UFO sightings that have been some of the craziest that the world's ever seen. And yeah, we saved the best for last here. But before we get started, John, why don't you tell everyone at home what remote viewing is so that we kind of help them understand what we do here.
Yeah, it's a way to gain non-local information. In other words, information outside of your 5 senses. It's a sixth sense that's used in a very methodical and I guess you could say scientific way, and using multiple people who are trained in this methodology to kind of paint a picture of what's going on things that you can't get information on in any other way. Developed in the 70s by CIA and Stanford Research Institute. So
yeah, definitely go check that stuff out on your own. We've talked about remote viewing in a bunch of our other episodes that I think you'll find really interesting as well. So go check those out. Well, all right, John.
I mean, Lake Michigan's so weird. Did you know that Michigan was actually, it's got the most amount of Dogman sightings. Dogman, right?
Michigan proper.
Michigan itself, Michigan proper itself is like where Dogman seems to have originated from as well. Like, we didn't even go into that.
I thought Dogman was more Canadian, but Michigan butts up against Canada. So that...
Hey, that might have been, well, nobody's really in Canada, so... I don't even know if Canada actually exists.
Yeah.
I think there's just an ice wall there. Isn't there just an ice wall and it's just a myth? Canada is a myth?
I think the biggest haunting of Canada really is just their use of the word "a" and everything that they say. It haunts me at night.
What was that movie? Those two guys it was like a 1980s movie, and they got to work in a beer factory in Canada, and everything was A. I can't remember their names. That was one of my favorite movies when I was a kid.
One of my favorite movies actually is that movie Goon. You can check it out on Netflix. It's all about hockey, and this one guy that he could just take a punch, and it's just great. Hilarious movie, and it a lot of the Canadian culture is in there, and actually the Canadians do a lot of things right, and hockey is one of them for sure.
Yeah, right. So yeah, Dogman. I mean, Dogman could have Dogman originated in Canada, and oh man, that looks bad.
It's you and Heather, check it out. It's actually hilarious, that movie. Yeah.
So Dogman, I mean, there's a ton of Dogman sightings. The most Dogman sightings occur in Michigan itself. So there's something we didn't even touch on. I mean, Michigan is full of it's just endless high strangeness. And so then we get to this whole Mothman side. Well, I mean, first the triangle with the structure in it, the ancient structure, and then we get to the Mothman side. I mean, this is going down a path of where is this going? Why is this happening?
Well, and I think in 2017, I think it was, there were 52 sightings of Mothman, and those are just the ones that were recorded.
Right. Those are just the ones that are recorded.
And there are Mothman sightings all the time there. But anyone who's researched the Mothman knows that the Mothman originated in Point Pleasant, right?
Well, so we think. I mean, that was the first.
Okay, true.
Yeah, that was the first big public thing that happened, just because John Keel got involved, who was a reporter for a paper. I mean, it's like people read paper. It used to be that newspapers were really important to get information. Now it's like, I'm a reporter for a paper. What? What? You're a reporter for a paper. So they sent him down there to report on what was going on with the Mothman in Point Pleasant. I think that was 1970s, I think. And you know what? I think that might be that photo that Lindsay's showing right now. That
one of my action figures that I put wings on, that I super glued wings on and threw it into the air when I was a kid.
That's what it is. Actually, it looks like an owl carrying a snake, possibly.
It does.
Doesn't it? You don't know the context of the size here.
You don't, yeah.
Yeah. That's the thing that bugs me with some of these photos.
Although, because we can see the tree there, we can assume that this figure is actually pretty massive.
Yeah.
Because you have the tree to compare it to, right?
Yeah.
Theoretically, of course.
Right. Anyway, we get to Point Pleasant when the Mothman prophecies. There's a movie made with Richard Gere. Yeah. Which, the best thing is to read the book, The Mothman Prophecies by John Keel. That is the quintessential, high strangeness researcher's book. That book is incredible, way better than the movie. But that the whole phenomena that occurred and why they term it as high strangeness is because all these other phenomena started to happen concurrent with the Mothman, people seeing the Mothman. And then when John Keel got involved, he, as opposed to just reporting on it, he became involved in it, where he would get these strange phone calls and strange voices giving him information over the phone, where men in black would show up and communicate with him, and him receiving information from the Mothman ultimately on the Silver Bridge collapse, right? Because at the end of this whole crazy series of events with the Mothman in Point Pleasant, you had the big bridge collapse. Where many people died, and the Mothman had somehow been warning John Keel of this bridge collapse, and it literally disappeared for the most part after that happened. So it's caused people to speculate on, what's the Mothman? Why does it show up before doom occurs? Does it make doom occur? Right? Is it a harbinger?
Well, I mean, that would make sense why it's in Chicago, since there's more murders there in the United States than there are anywhere else.
Yeah, no kidding, right?
He's like, look, my home now. There's doom here every day.
Right, exactly. I know.
I can't find a place in the United States that's crazier, so I'm just going to fly around here.
Yeah, I know. Mothman needs to write a book. Doom is my bedfellow by the Mothman.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, though.
Humans find me scary. I find Chicago scary.
Right, exactly.
I'm here as a reporter.
Oh my gosh. No kidding, right? I mean, you get to the Nain Rouge, which is...
Okay. So we were just talking about Mothman for a second, and we're going to go into that a little bit more. But this term might be new to you all out there, this Nain Rouge. John, can you explain what the Nain Rouge or what we know of it is?
Yeah, it's the it comes out of France, and it's French Canadian. It's basically, it means red dwarf. So there's a red dwarf. Now this is predominantly coming out of Detroit, Michigan area, because this is where it was first encountered or publicly encountered, and I think it was the first mayor or official in Detroit.
And where is this in Canada? Like Victoria or?
What's that? We're talking about Detroit.
Detroit.
Michigan.
Oh, yeah. It was Detroit. I thought
Detroit,
you said Canada
right?
first. Okay.
Right. So I don't know if this has been around Chicago, but so it's a red dwarf, and it's a troublesome being, because when this being shows up to people, all sorts of bad stuff starts happening. Like, for instance, when it was seen around 1812. It was seen around 1812. Then the British began bombarding the American forces at Fort Detroit, right? Mm. So it was seen in, I think, 1805, or 1977. It was seen by a Detroit Edison lineman. It went up a utility pole, and then the next day, a historic ice storm left 400,000 people without electricity. So,
wow.
So what we're looking at here is the same type of stuff that shows up after people see Mothman, right? The Silver Bridge collapse and other calamities back in Point Pleasant. Now you've got the Nain Rouge in Detroit, has the same, it doesn't look like the Mothman, obviously.
No, it doesn't.
But it's got the same kind of story around it, right? So it's like somebody sees this creature, like they see the Mothman, then bad stuff happens. Big bad stuff, not like personal bad stuff, big bad stuff. So Mothman, we know, is kind of a shapeshifter. When people see Mothman, they will sometimes see it shift and change into a shiny cylindrical object, or they'll see those around Mothman as well. Right. So here in Detroit, like what Lindsay's showing is that people have parades about this creature. They have parades. They have a day for this creature where they basically say, leave it alone, or leave us alone, basically. It's a really fascinating piece of culture. It's like Americana, French, Canadian, Americana culture mixing together with this whole creature.
This should get a lot more press.
It should get a lot more press.
America would be a lot happier if stuff like that got more press.
It would be. Yeah. So it's funny, though. It's like, okay, so why is it that you have this creature, the same kind of weird stuff is happening around it, and it's been happening for a while, since the 1800s. Same with the Mothman. And you've got the Mothman, who people think of as the shapeshifter type creature. So could this be the same thing? Could it be related to Mothman? It's kind of the same region, same area around Lake Michigan. Weird stuff is happening there. But, what we have now with the Mothman is a huge focus on the Chicago area, a huge focus. I mean, like, if you look at the sighting map that I think Lindsay's got there, and she'll probably pull that up. You look at the sighting map of Mothman in Chicago, and this is coming from Phantoms and Monsters. Lon Strickler, who runs that website, has really been mapping these things out and getting interviews with witnesses. I mean, some of these accounts are literally people, normal people in the city, in Chicago, who are walking down the street. They encounter this, 6-7 foot tall crazy moth looking being.
Lindsay, you zoom into Chicago, or move over to where Chicago is, so you can see all of the sightings on there. It's really interesting once you get over there. Yeah, there you go. You're starting to see them there.
So you have some accounts where Mothman's literally pursuing people down the street, like chasing after people.
Yeah, after it made eye contact, it starts to like go after them, right?
Right, exactly. Like, what is going on there? I mean, with the data that we have on Mothman, we've looked a lot into it. A lot of it is like this creature is a little confused. It's kind of like this being is sort of tumbling through multi-dimensional time space and ending up in these locations over and over in order to solve some sort of internal equation that it has. And a lot of times what we find in these individual instances where a person encounters Mothman is this sense of utter confusion coming from Mothman on what is going on. It's a very strange thing. I've never run across any sort of strange, consistent data like this before. And, I did an episode on this on Edge of Wonder.
Yeah.
On the Mothman. And one thing that I found curious.
It was on Chronicles of a Psychic Spy, right? Yeah,
it's on Chronicles of the Psychic Spy. One thing I find really interesting, this picture that Lindsay's got right now, look at the wings. Right? Yeah, this is the butterfly.
Yeah, those are butterfly wings.
Right. But see, that's the whole thing of it. And this is what shows up in the data. It's like the butterfly effect, where one perturbation of some environmental condition creates this hurricane on the other side of the world, months later. What we found with the Mothman is it's like that, except it's through multidimensional time and space. So there's something very curious about the wings of the Mothman and the idea of the butterfly effect. I mean, like,
What is the butterfly effect for those at home that don't know?
The butterfly effect is the idea of a butterfly. It literally comes out of this idea. A butterfly flaps its wings in a rainforest, and the very slight wind or particles moved off of that wing cause a chain reaction where down the road a hurricane arrives in Florida, right? So that's the butterfly effect, where it's a chain of events that can happen from one small tiny thing that occurred somewhere else.
This was probably one of the things that when I was young would keep me up at night the most. Is like thinking about how every single thing was a chain reaction to everything going on.
Exactly.
Like, I would ponder it for hours and hours.
Right. But that's the weird thing with all this. What we found with the Mothman is that it's not so much moth wings, it's butterfly wings. And it's like almost this reference to the butterfly effect, but multidimensional. And when we get Mothman in a location, kind of like with the attitude of like, well, what am I doing here? What's happening here? And then quickly going off to another location. It's like it's running off of this internal thing that it's got to do, accomplish, get done, that stretches and spans throughout the multiverse, right? So when you see Mothman now showing up in Chicago, in the amount that it's showing up, it's like, what took it from there? What took it from Point Pleasant to there? Like when I look at our remote viewing data, it's like,
yeah, what is it? Why Mount Pleasant? Why Point Pleasant or whatever?
Excuse me. So there seems to be something about a balance that Mothman is trying to achieve through physical events. Think about like, it's a very complicated thing to explain. Think about.
I think I know. I think I get it. I think I get what you're saying.
Right. So think about a balance. There's no time in Mothman's experience. There's no time. It just moves and ends up in these locations. There's some kind of balance that we've seen in the data between Point Pleasant and Chicago. There's some equilibrium that's supposed to be met within itself by going to various locations, right? And I honestly don't understand what that means. It just shows up in the data, right? Because it's this thing that's beyond even our human thinking. It's not even how humans think. So when you get here to Chicago, some of the things that show up in the data that Mothman is curious and interested in is this structure. The structure that we find in the triangle and other structures under the water. So we found that in Chicago area or in Lake Michigan off Chicago, you do have other structures there. And I think this points to
what other structures, John, are below the water more near Chicago?
We've seen pyramids buried under sand.
No way.
Yeah. We've seen pyramids buried under sand. There's a lot of energy. There's a ton of energy, and it's portal-like energy. And this relates to the building of the like Lake Michigan Stonehenge, right? You know, they built that there because there's a ton of energy flow, and they're trying to utilize it. Or they remembered something like that where there was a portal. When you have a portal, you build one of these, right? You know, so that's what you do. And so in that area, you've got those earth energies converging. And this is the thing where you find Mothman showing up around these types of structures, around these types of nodes of earth energies, right? This shows up in our data. So there is this correlation between Mothman there and that going on in the lake right now.
You know, okay, so what's strange, like we have this map that we've pulled up where we can see most of the sightings. John and I were looking at this yesterday ahead of the show. And what's really bizarre is that the most sightings are in areas where there's the most amount of like foot traffic, which makes sense, right? So we've got Chicago proper, the city along the coast. And then we've got the airport, which is where people are coming and going all the time. But what's strange about that is if there are this many sightings around the high populated or high traffic areas, how many times has this being appeared that we're missing all around here?
Right.
And I think I don't know, but actually what I'm really, really curious to do right now is a big dig on what scientific stuff have they done or attempted in the Chicago area.
Right.
Because actually,
rather than just collecting witness accounts, like,
yes, because the thing is like we've got witness accounts, right? But what you said in your remote viewing data about this being whatever it is, like I almost got the Montauk feeling vibes here of like something interdimensionally that like scientists probably like screwed up interdimensionally or like time space wise, and this being is trying to almost like correct that stuff.
Exactly.
So there isn't a
that's exactly what it is. You succinctly nailed that on the head. It's trying to correct something, literally trying to correct something, right? That's what we see. Now, the curious part too is that it does involve portals. It does involve bodies of water. It's so one of the things that we saw with where Mothman is also hovering around was the Navy shipyard area of Chicago, which is right on the edge of the lake.
And the Navy is kind of known for a lot of these types of experiments.
Right.
I mean, look at the Philadelphia Project. We talked about that in our last show,
right.
One of our last shows.
Right, exactly. So one of the weird things, though, too, is that there's this water treatment plant where the water is like being swirled in this treatment plant. So the water is being swirled, and they're treating water right on the coast there, just right outside of the city. And we had that show up in the data over and over again as this weird dimensional gateway interest of Mothman as well. And so we know that vortexes will create energy that will create openings. I mean, look, I'm just reporting on the data. I don't know what to do with it when you get right down to it. I don't know what it means 100%. I can extrapolate and say that there are portals that Mothman is interested in and utilizing and are being created. But really what I'm getting to is that we can go to these locations. Heather and I were in Chicago last year, scoping out these locations where our data is showing this is where you're going to see a Mothman if you hang out long enough, right? And all those locations are city locations.
Yeah, in the city.
Right, exactly.
So what is going on below the city, or what strange scar or event caused all of this?
Right.
What is it? I mean, and was it, but why? Like the other thing too is like, if it appeared in Mount Pleasant, it has to be appearing in more places than we're seeing on that map.
Right.
Like,
so
can you zoom out a little bit on that map, Lindsay? And we can see that there are a few more sightings on there that show outside of the greater Chicago area that this thing is kind of showing up a little bit, right? Like we've got an appearance. Scroll in a little bit, so zoom in a little bit here. Like we've got some appearances out here in Wisconsin. We've got an appearance down near Bloomington in Illinois. We've got a few in Indiana, right? Indianapolis. Like it must be visiting some other places. As far as Point Pleasant.
I mean, we know that this list was created by Lon from Phantoms and Monsters website. So I think his main focus just might be here. And he's not cataloging them elsewhere. I don't know for sure. But the reason why he's cataloging it to begin with is because of the high concentration over the years, or pretty much all of a sudden, I mean, this has not been going on for more than 10 years in this area, I don't think. Probably not even more than 5 years. So what does it mean? Does this mean massive doom is going to happen? Is this like Nain Rouge, where people see this and all of a sudden Chicago's going to explode? Because I mean, you've got so many sightings of this that is something really, really horrible.
What if the catastrophes, okay, like hear me out here on this theory, okay? Think about what happened at Point Pleasant, you know. He appears and the bridge collapses. Okay, and then there's people that die from the bridge collapsing, and people are blaming it on the Mothman.
Right.
But what if what you said about the butterfly, excuse me, the butterfly effect is true, and he's appearing in these places because whatever occurred, this strange like snowballing effect is he knows it's going to affect a certain area, and he's trying to get ahead of it to work out whatever the problem is, and then the catastrophe either happens or it doesn't ahead of time.
Exactly. Ultimately that's what the data is pointing to, and that all of this leads to an equilibrium within itself where it literally gains enlightenment. It's like a path that this being is. I mean, we think only in terms of humans and how humans go through life and our own spiritual experience. What we see in the data on this is that this is a spiritual path that this particular being is on. I mean, it's absolutely bizarre as that sounds.
Maybe it is. Maybe
it's trying to find itself.
But also
it's also a bit horrified.
I was going to say, objectively, this thing is like a monster, right? Let's say science turned it into that thing. And in order to undo this, it has to, it's like, imagine like a cursed being that, like, in order to uncurse itself, it has to go through this, this process, this whole timeline of events and spiritual journey to unbeastify itself.
I mean, maybe also, here's an idea. Maybe one of these Montauk-like experiments brought it into this realm when it wasn't supposed to be in the first place.
Yeah.
And now it's trapped and trying to get out. It's like now it's at the next place where it's like trying to figure out these portals in that area so it can get out through there.
Yeah. And what if to that being, this is a matter of minutes or hours, and to us we're looking at it over like a really crazy long period of time because it just keeps appearing and trying to fix crap, and then it's bouncing out and going to the next thing.
Exactly. Exactly. That's exactly what the data shows. Weird. It's like spinning through the multi dimensions. There's no time. It's just ripping through. All of a sudden it'll find itself in one location and it'll see something and see a person and then go after that person because it's probably like trying to ask it, what's happening here? That's kind of the feeling. I don't know what's going
happening
on
here. Why am I a Mothman?
Sorry, I'm a big, huge, scary moth bat, but can you help me? I mean, maybe all those people that are being chased by it are literally Mothman trying to ask for help.
It could be. It could be, but it's terrifying. So everyone's running in terror. Right?
Exactly.
I mean, especially it makes eye contact with you and then just starts coming after you.
Don't make eye contact with Mothman. Just don't do it.
You're not supposed to, right?
You're not supposed to.
That's a thing.
Right. You're not supposed to do it. Yeah. So, but I think ultimately, that the Mothman seems to be attracted to those structures and that area that's highly energetic within the lake. I think that's ultimately where this is going, where Mothman is moving toward, or is, the sightings are occurring around the airport and along the coast. What's happening over the triangle area? There has to be a way to collect information on this than just through witness reports, like setting up cameras, using remote viewing to understand where to go, because we've seen some things that should lead us to actually capturing evidence.
I think this is going to take us time to solve. And I think, I agree. But I think that we have to look at, a number of scientific experiments that have gone on potentially in the area, or military experiments.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Right.
And then individually kind of start piecing together a potential story for this, because we're not just talking about yes, there's the Mothman, but then there's also Chicago. There's also Point Pleasant. There's also a lot of people are calling this being the harbinger of disaster, but really we don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know. And we don't know if it's good or it's bad or it just is. But there's so like Lake Michigan, that first episode we did on Lake Michigan, if this crap was going to go on anywhere in the country, it's probably around Lake Michigan.
Yeah, exactly.
It's weird.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that this has a huge amount of room on the investigation side. I think that's a really good idea to try to understand. I mean, what type of weird naval experiments and whatnot have gone on around in that area. I mean, this really reminds me of something like Stranger Things.
It is.
And like Montauk, where we're using the radar to try to pulse another dimension to kind of bring ours together. The demiurge. And so it's like, is this something similar to that? There could have been something going on.
Something's up, and whether natural or unnatural, there's some kind of portal stuff going on here for sure.
Right. And the other side of this is that we have to make a trip out there.
Yeah, we do.
We have to make a trip out there.
For sure we do.
Yeah.
I think I could probably drive there in half a day.
Yeah. I'm sure. Yeah. Well, not right now. I mean, right now.
No, we're not going there in those.
Unless you want to look at the ice balls.
You don't even like, yeah. You don't even like driving in the winter. Never mind, us driving out there the worst time of the year.
Exactly.
Yeah. But no, I definitely think that this is, I think we've uncovered quite a bit of the mystery, but this is going to be something we have to revisit because
it raises more questions. So
it raises more questions than it does answer.
Right. Yeah.
Because there has to be a reason. There has to be a reason for this to happen. And yeah, what is the strange recipe of things in Lake Michigan that are drawing all of this to it?
Right. And why is it connected to Point Pleasant? Maybe it began there. I mean, I think we need to look there for any strange experiments.
Well, yeah, and West Virginia.
Yeah,
dude, we could do a series on West Virginia. Yeah, West Virginia. I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how much research you've done about Kentucky, West Virginia, the entire area, but West Virginia wouldn't even like the Native Americans wouldn't even build their homes there. They were just like, stay away from it.
I do know that the one thing I know about Kentucky is the land between the lakes, where there was the supposed incident where Dogman murdered a whole family, and then the government covered it up and went and killed those dogmen. The Beast of Bray Road.
I remember this. Yeah. I looked into this one.
That's the only thing I know about Kentucky. I don't know the state flower, the mascot, anything. I only know about the cryptids.
Okay, well, apparently on the edge of Kentucky and West Virginia, West Virginia has mounds there. Okay. Right. And the mounds apparently were, from a long time ago, maybe some ancient war or something, but like the locals there have strange stories. And one of the main homes in one of these small towns moved the house. Now you can think about trying to do this back in the day. It moved the house to turn it towards those mounds.
Really?
And the only significant symbolism in this home was that there were griffins on the home. So they pointed the griffins at the strangeness to keep it out of Kentucky.
Right. That's weird.
It's super weird. And so, okay, now West Virginia itself, like the fact that the Native Americans wouldn't even populate the area.
Yeah.
For what reason? Is it was almost like the land itself was like scarred. And West Virginia, West Virginia is big. West Virginia is also like strangely beautiful, but there is something in the air in certain parts of West Virginia when you ride through it where you're like, this place feels strange.
Right. Yeah.
So maybe it did start in West Virginia. Maybe we need to figure that out, right?
Well, so yeah, what are the more historical, deeper history accounts of Mothman? Are there any, or was that the first one? It's like the chupacabra. The chupacabra is not that dog-looking creature that people put picture. It's not that, which is very strange. I don't know why people push that as the chupacabra, but the chupacabra actually started when this is what our data said, when a genetic testing lab or genetic engineering lab in Puerto Rico was destroyed by a hurricane, that these things got out.
Wait, it was a what lab?
It was so in Puerto Rico, there's a lot of weird stuff that goes on because it's sort of a black project site for US and others. And they do genetic experimentation there, crossings. You're talking about black projects.
Yes.
And when the chupacabra first showed up was, I think it was the 80s, 1980s or 1990s. I can't remember the exact date. That's when it first showed up. It showed up after a hurricane had come through. When we looked at the origination point of the chupacabra, it was literally a thing that got out of a lab that was doing genetic experimentation in Puerto Rico. So it's like, is the Mothman a similar idea, a similar thing, right?
Oh man, there's so much that we could go into after, eventually we're just going to be doing this show like every day.
I know.
Like pumping stuff out because there's like way too much to cover.
Exactly. Yeah. So,
all right. Well, John, did you have anything else to add before we wrap this episode?
No, because if I do, it's going to go on for another 3 hours.
It's going to unravel. All right, you guys. Well, we've covered Mothman sightings, other Great Lakes mysteries, and so much more in tonight's show. But we have so many other topics to cover. And I just want to thank you, remote viewer John Vivanco, for joining me. I am investigative researcher Rob Counts. Thanks for being with us today on Metaphysical. And I hope you thought this episode was out of this world. And we'll see you next time.